Apart by the sea, about an hour's drive north of Los Angeles. She shares life along the coast of her native California with husband John Gregory Dunn, who is also a writer. They're a prolific literary pair, turning out essays on the California lifestyle, book reviews, novels, and even screenplays. It was Dunn's idea to bring back A Star is Born as a rock love story, and they wrote the initial screenplay. But it is Didion's work as an essayist and novelist that is most celebrated.
Welcome to college. This is my very last video for now with the Literary Gladiators. I would like to thank you all so much for being here. My name is Maya, she, they, pronouns, and today we're going to talk about grief. When I moved to California for college a few months ago, I brought with me quite a few books, as you probably would expect. One of which was Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking, which chronicles her exploration of grief after the passing of her husband and then her daughter Quintana. The Year of Magical Thinking is distinct in literary circles because it does not deal with grief in a religious sense. It's one of the only secular novels exploring how people are able to manage just the overwhelming loss of people and of what those people represent in their life, that stability, that hope. Didion was revolutionary in that way. I thought it would be a good first or second read as I established myself in college, not only because Didion was a literary trailblazer and just an incredibly eloquent writer, but because she also represents LA in at least part. She represents what California was, what the movie and writing industries looked like at a certain time in space. And I'd say that she's complemented in that way by Eve Babbitt's, who I read a lot of this past summer before moving to California. I'm currently reading LA Woman. She claims Jim Morrison stole that from her, which I think is pretty funny. But it just seemed in all ways to be almost the perfect synthesis of the experience of moving and of, in a way, my own grief, because when you move, you leave behind a form of a life. You don't spend 18 years in one place with the same people and then totally uproot that and feel nothing. I think the hardest part about moving to college for me has been friends. I was really lucky enough in my senior year of high school to establish a fantastic group of friends. We were all really, really close, did so much together, maybe a little too much together, but it was just a really joyful time, and this past summer was the best summer of my life. Moving to college I knew would be challenging because our whole friend group kind of split off into different corners of the country. One of my friends is in school in Washington. Another friend leaves for school on Tuesday to go to New York City to perform on Broadway. So exciting stuff. So I knew it would be hard, and I knew that our relationships would not stay the same because relationships are dynamic, and that's part of what makes them so great, but it's also part of what makes them painful. I suffered no delusions that we would stay as close and as in touch as we were this past summer. There's literally no way to do that without being physically present in each other's lives, because we were experiencing things in real time together and growing as people together. However, I was also aware that it would be up to me and up to them to foster our relationships, and that our friendships could survive this. They would just morph. They would just look different, and that's okay. And I felt the same way about going into college and making new friends. My sophomore year of high school, I switched schools, and it was an awful experience. I didn't make friends at all for the first semester, and I remember my dad, who works from home, would come and eat lunch with me like every other day because I didn't have anyone to eat with, and I was severely depressed at that time. It was not a shining moment in the life and times of Maya Epstein. Clearly I overcame that, but I think it was, in hindsight, not good, because I don't think that suffering should be equated with learning. I don't think you should have to suffer to learn, but I think it was a valuable experience because it prepared me for the loneliness of college, because it is lonely, especially if you're moving out of state and don't have a solid community that you're migrating with. It takes a lot of time to make close friends, and very rarely is the first person you connect with going to be a person that sticks around. It's not always true, but in my experience, it's definitely been the norm. And that's perfectly okay. It's really painful, and it's uncomfortable, and it's lonely, and sometimes it can be so lonely that You know, you end up alone in your dorm, just sleeping whole days. But it's also a part of the overall college endeavor. One of the reasons I decided to go to college was for the social aspect, was to network and make friends. Because in the film industry, you know, film school is very much a contested topic. Do you really need it to succeed? No, like probably not. But in terms of making lifelong connections and establishing working relationships with people who are going into the same field as you, it's pretty valuable. And so at this point, on October 14th, 2022, I'm about nearly 2 months into my freshman year. I'm technically a sophomore, my freshman year of college. And things are looking up. Have I yet found a really close friend group? No. Have I made some people who I think could fall into a very close friend group? Yeah. Will that happen? Time will tell. It's part of the fun, it's part of the ouch. And I think Didion, of course it's different. It's different with actual death as opposed to absence. But I think it's valuable to look at loneliness from any perspective when you are suffering loneliness yourself. And it is definitely an epidemic. And I think that I found solace in books in that way my whole life, but especially in college, I knew it would be a crutch that I could lean on and a coping mechanism that I would find peace in. And I also wanted to make sure I wasn't pressuring myself to read too much. I tend to do that. After 2020, I don't think I'll ever read as much as I did again. There's just no way to read 123 books in a year without a pandemic raging and being in a really privileged place. So I think it's important to remember that reading is not a competition, but a way for us to connect with one another. And that in writing, The Year of Magical Thinking, and I'm not even halfway through, but in writing it, Didion is already reaching out. That was an act of reaching out. And it was an act of making sure that going forward, people would have a medium through which to explore and traverse their own experiences with grief. And I think that's a really beautiful and selfless thing that she did, and probably something that also helped her just in working through what she was going through. Journaling is fantastic in that way. I would highly recommend journaling at any point in life, but especially in transitional periods where things are going to be rocky and they're going to be uncomfortable and sometimes borderline miserable. I think Didion was also really valuable for me in her portrait of LA. I'm not in LA, I'm just outside of it, but really nearby. And you know, California is frequently mythologized, especially within the United States, maybe even outside of, as just this glamorous place with beautiful summer weather all the time and stardom and glitz and the whole 9 yards. And of course, Didion's perspective was limited. She did live in a really privileged circle in LA in a certain time period. But as a journalist, I think she was able to explore more of what California meant and its shared histories and the abundance of cultures here, and how beautiful and messy and chaotic it all is, and how much work there is left to do to make sure that people can thrive here. Something I wanted to refrain from is something I saw a lot in YouTubers like talking about why they're leaving LA, why they're leaving California, because it's, you know, it's the cement jungle. It's super spread out. There's not a lot to do here. It's, you know, I think that's a loophole that's really easy to fall into when you're living in a certain way in California, but I think it's also important to acknowledge the cultural histories here. And I think Didion at least touches on that a little bit and gave me some gateways to learn more about the place that I'm living now and that I'll probably be living in for a while. Gotta love honking, man. She provided me an outlet to interweave like a tapestry of what California has been, and what it can be for me, and what it looks like it could be but probably won't be, and the sorrow within that, and the joy as well. There's grief in moving physical locations as well as moving away from people, but there's also the potential for just fantastic exploration and adventure, and that's what I've been trying to embrace, even in small ways, like sitting out here outside at a dorm I don't even live in and doing my Israel-Palestine essay. It's pretty devastating, man, but there are beautiful small things to be found everywhere. And I think that's what the Year of Magical Thinking really gets at, is that in grief, there is grounding in small joys, and I've been trying to latch onto those as much as humanly possible. Books have been a great way to do that for me. Thank you so much for being here. I've so much enjoyed my time with the Literary Gladiators. Excellent channel, doing excellent work, and it's been a real honor to be able to contribute in any sort of way. Thank you also for following along on my own, internet life journey. It's cool. It's pretty cool. You're pretty cool. And I'm sure I'll see you around. Until then, keep reading, but don't pressure yourself to read. Oh my god, there are acorns falling from the sky. And remember that there is joy in the world around you. And with that, I will say adieu. Bye.
Don't you think sometimes people are formed by the landscape they grow up in? There's a picture of the valley there, that particular look of absolutely flat land and that sense of things growing. It formed everything I ever think or ever do or am.